Bob Sansevere here with Pioneer Press Deputy Sports Editor John Pluym, who I think has an opinion too about the Vikings. Interesting game on Monday night. Now, you got to give them credit. They didn't give up 50, and they did score a touchdown. Can't even say it with a straight face. How you coming off the bye? You have 2 weeks to prepare for the Packers, and this is what you come out with. Your thoughts?
It's been 20 months since the 12th man on the field. How has this team fallen so far in 20 months? I think that's the toughest question.
Randy Moss's fault.
Maybe not even the toughest that you ask yourself. And the other interesting thing is when you look at this team, like if you were to develop a nucleus of this team, offensively and defensively, how many of these players would you keep? I mean, offensively, you've got 3 potential stars in Harvin, Peterson, and Ponder. Maybe
no potential stars. Kyle Rudolph's a potential star.
Kyle Rudolph, the catch he made last night might be the best catch, possibly by a tight end ever who played for the Vikings. And then defensively, other than Jared Allen,
Robinson,
and maybe Chad Greenway, and I'm not even going to put Robinson in because Robinson,
I will.
He's fallen off so badly in the last 3 games. The guy's having no impact. But other than that, the back 7 of the defense absolutely kills this team. And not having Pat Williams run stuffer in the middle makes Kevin Williams just an ordinary player. And you add all of those things up, and you get 2-7.
I think it's a combination of things with Kevin Williams. He does miss Pat Williams, and I still think there's more issues with his foot than they're letting on or he's letting on. But you're right. The secondary, Antoine Winfield, done. They have that secondary is in shambles.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, you've got one guy who they're paying but isn't allowed to be at the facility. Winfield might never play again. Cedric Griffin, it's really sad what's happened to him because again, you go back 20 months, he suffers that ACL injury in the NFC Championship game. Last year, he tears his other ACL against the Jets. He was just starting to come into his own. He'd signed that new 5-year, $27 million contract, and now he probably shouldn't even be in the league. He's fallen so bad. And then Hussein Abdul and Jamarcus Sanford, they're the 2 worst safeties in football. Sanford embarrassed himself on the punt return with Cobb. He embarrassed himself on the pass over the middle for the touchdown. And I don't know what he was doing on the touchdown to Jermichael Finley late in the game. It looked like he went to the stands to grab a beer, came back to the goal line and said, "Here, catch it." I mean, it's totally embarrassing, and it all starts with Rick Spielman, who's been silent since the draft.
Let's say I'm Ziggy Wilf, owner of the Vikings. I'm on the internet surfing around, and I come across the podcast, and I hear John Pluym, who has all the answers. I decide I'm going to hire John Pluym to be my general manager, which I desperately need. What is John Pluym going to do to make this team better in 2012? Who does he trade? Who does he keep? How does he make over a roster in desperate need of making over?
I think the first things I would do is I'd release Steve Hutchinson. I'd release Winfield.
You wouldn't try to trade him? Get anything for him?
I don't know what you're going to get for him at this
point. Any draft picks is
you're not going to build a team with 6th and 7th round draft picks. I mean, that's what Spielman's trying to do now. They loaded up on 3 6th rounders and 2 7th rounders this year. None of those guys are having any impact on this team. And then maybe you get something for him, but you got to get.
Wait a minute. Didn't the Packers get their starting running back in the 6th round? James Starks?
That's Green Bay. That's not Minnesota.
I understand that, but I'm saying they have value with those picks.
Well, it'd be nice if.
But anyway, reshape the team.
The biggest difference, Bob, is you've got Ted Thompson in Green Bay who oversees the personnel. I mean, he calls the shots. Nobody here in Minnesota knows who's calling the shots. At one point, it was everybody thought it was Brad Childress.
We know that. I want to hear what you're going to do to make the team better.
Get
rid of Hutchinson.
Get rid of Hutchinson. I'd release Kevin Williams. I'd get rid of Winfield. I wouldn't re-sign E.J. Henderson. And then with the money that I'd save, I'd go into free agency and I'd get myself a corner.
You better get yourself a guard.
Get myself a corner, and then my first 3 draft picks, all offensive linemen. They need to rebuild in front of Christian Ponder. If he's the future of this team, you got to have offensive linemen, and you got to get him a wide receiver who can make plays down the field. Because if you don't do those things, we're looking at another 4-12, 5-11 season next year again.
And you do think that you would get rid of Hutchinson?
He's been great. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame. But the guy he's a mediocre player, and he's not. His cap hit for next year is $8.5 million.
That's the reason you try to do something with him.
You can't pay a guy like that $8.5 million.
And you're going to unload $5 million with McNabb.
You're going to unload McNabb. That's $5 million. You're going to unload Henderson. That's another $5 million. Unless Kevin Williams renegotiates, he's a $7.5 million cap.
You're going to wipe out the secondary, which isn't a lot.
You're going to wipe out the secondary. I mean, let's be honest here. There's not anybody in that secondary worth keeping. As far as the linebacking core, Chad Greenway, that signing looks like one of the biggest mistakes that the Vikings have made probably in five years. Signing him to a 5-year, $41 million contract. The guy makes no plays, no interceptions, no sacks. I mean, look at Clay Matthews last night. The guy was unblockable. Chad Greenway, he can't even get to the quarterback. You don't pay a guy because he gets 10 tackles, 10 yards down the field, $7 million a year. He's not worth it.
I'm gonna check with you later in the day to see if Ziggy did make that call, because you do have all the answers. Let's see now. But now they have a game coming up against Oakland that's winnable, right?
Maybe.
Just maybe.
We'll see what Carson Palmer does against.
Frankly, one thing that if were I, and maybe you would feel the same way, were I involved, I would certainly change things up offensively. I would get Kyle Rudolph on the field with Shanko for every play. Get Percy out there and get Camarillo out there, because these are guys with good hands. They're the 4 best receivers in terms of their hands on the team.
I think Jenkins is a pretty good receiver.
You work him in.
He's been a nice pickup.
He has not been a bad. You're absolutely right, but you work him in. But you got to get Rudolph in the game more, if for no other reason, to get he and Ponder better acclimated and get a rhythm together and get their chemistry, because there is a chemistry they've started to develop. There's no reason to not be playing this kid because of the talent he has.
I totally agree with it. And I think the other point, too, that deserves some discussion is Leslie Frazier overmatched for this job right now? Was he the right choice? Should they have looked outside? And, he did a great job as an interim.
He did, and that's why I don't think you could say he's overmatched, because he did do a great job.
But how much of this is talent? How much of this is coaching? I thought last night when Fred Evans basically left his brains on the field and couldn't line up on sides, and they had to give up the 47-yard field goal for the 52-yard field goal. That's a point where you take your kicker off the field. You're kicking into a wind, a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind. You put him on the sideline. You bring in Pluym and you pin him inside the 10. There's just been too many of those. Those mistakes shouldn't be happening at this point in the season.
Now, going back to after Ziggy hires you to be the GM, do you consider or field offers for Adrian Peterson or Jared Allen?
No. Would not trade either one of those
I
guys.
agree with you. I would do that. I would agree with that, too, because they both are. You're talking of probably the 2 best players at their position in the NFL.
Without a doubt.
Because I've heard people saying, trade, and they're not as good a GM as you would be. Trade Peterson, trade Allen. The problem is, anyone you would try to trade, you have to get value back, and that's the issue right now. Before someone with your astute knowledge took over.
Look at Jared Allen last night. The guy had a sack, 3 tackles for loss. I think he ended up with 8 or 9 total tackles. I mean, he totally dominated along the defensive line. And Peterson, it's hard to put the 51 yards rushing on him last night when the 5 guys up front, probably couldn't move a middle school team at this point.
There's not a team in the league that would not love to have Jared Allen rushing for them.
And you trade those guys. I mean, let's take Jacksonville. 4 years ago, they trade 4 draft picks to move up, and they draft Derek Harvey. Who is Derek Harvey? He never did anything. The move to get Allen was one of the best free agent moves probably in the past 15 years.
Somebody did a story on this. I think it was someone with ESPN. You know who ruined this franchise? Dante Culpepper's 4,700-yard season, because he was done after that. This team could have had a shot at Aaron Rodgers, but they felt they were set at quarterback, and they took Troy Williamson.
Well, I mean, if you're a Vikings fan, the only thing you can basically hang your hat on right now is Ponder does look like he's gonna be a pretty good quarterback, and you've got Peterson, and you've got Harvin, and you've got Jared Allen. That's a really good nucleus, but they got to fill in around these guys. And right now, the roster just looks it's not even mediocre; it's below average.
John, we need to let you go because you're going to go sit by the phone to see what Ziggy has to say. But we'll be talking about this real soon.